My name is Meredith Winter, and at 29 years old, at 17, my family kicked me out after my adopted sister framed me. 10 years later, she confessed. But it was too late. They'd already destroyed me. My family eliminated me overnight because of a single untruth. After all, the truth has finally come out. I'm not looking for pity. I just want to tell you how everything went down. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. My family was having one of those large Saturday meals. Grandparents, uncles, cousins, the entire family. My parents enjoyed putting on shows when the house was filled. Mom was always in her element when there were others watching her, chatting loudly and boasting about how close our family is. Dad barbecued meat outside while my brother and I carried chairs from the garage. And then there was Claire, my adoptive sister. My parents brought her home when she was 10 because they had always desired a female. She fit well in from the beginning. Quiet, courteous, and bashful. I used to help her with her homework, teach her how to ride a bike, and defend her when other kids mocked her about being adopted. I never thought of her as anything other than my sister. That night she was acting odd. She wasn't eating and kept fidgeting with her hands. I believe she was either unwell or exhausted. After dinner, while everyone was in the living room, she stood up, shivering, and announced that she needed to tell everyone something. I recall her voice. It cracked like she was about to weep. Then she said it. Meredith stole Mom's diamond ring. It did not even register. Everyone froze. The room fell silent, save for the ticking of the clock. My brain did not process it at first. I assumed she meant something different. Perhaps this was a bad joke. Perhaps she was puzzled. Then she said, I saw her take it from Mom's vanity. My father's hand was on me before I could say anything. His punch landed on my face so hard that everything became white. My teeth buzzed and my ears rang as I landed on the floor. My mother started screaming as if someone had died. My brother stood there shaking his head and moaning. Meredith, what the heck is wrong with you? You are nasty. Dad, I did not. I attempted, but the next hit arrived before I could finish. You sick thief, he shouted, cheeks flushed and eyes wild. You brought humiliation to our family. Claire was screaming into our mother's arms, shaking and stating she was terrified. My aunt drew her close, whispering, It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. My brother Nathan came forward, spitting straight on my shoe. Get out, he snarled. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as us. I looked around at everyone's looks. People I had known all my life. None of them treated me like family anymore. Simply disgusted, I said, She's lying. My voice broke. I swear on my life she is lying. Nobody cared. My mother yelled, Don't even mention her name. Don't talk to her. I believe my uncle phoned the cops. When the cop arrived, I was sitting on the porch, bleeding from my lips. One of them asked my father if I was the suspect, and he simply nodded without looking at me. They didn't even cuff me harshly. They could see I was merely a child who appeared half dead. Still, riding in the rear seat with the sirens blaring was like being buried alive. At the station, they asked questions I couldn't comprehend. When did you last see the ring? Why were you in your parents' room? Do you have anything of value you tried to pawn? I kept saying that it never occurred. None of it. They did not book me. There was no proof, just nothing. No pawn slips, no surveillance, no ring. They let me go in the morning. I recall one of them mumbling the words, possible larceny, under his breath. Claire was 18, and I was 17, just a year difference. Yet they had to ask every question in the book. They took statements, contacted a social services representative, and even checked timelines on our phones. In the end, there was nothing to hold me up. So they sent me home with a warning to be available for further questioning. But when I went outdoors, the world was already aware. Our town wasn't large. By morning, half of it had already determined that I was guilty. I didn't go home immediately. I walked till my legs gave out. When I returned, my belongings were heaped on the front yard. Clothes, school books, and my rucksack. My father stood at the entrance like a guard. Get out, he said. His tone was not hostile this time, just chilly. You are done here. Dad, please. You recognize me. I would never. Don't call me that. You aren't my daughter anymore. I attempted to reach for my mother through the doorway. She turned aside, cradling Claire as if she were a victim of a home invasion. Nathan slammed the door behind them. I stood there. My hands were so shaky that I couldn't pick up my luggage. That night, my phone vibrated. It was Thomas, my boyfriend. We had been together a year. He knew me better than anyone else. He whispered through tears. I believe you, Meredith. I swear I do. But my parents won't allow me to speak to you. They believe it's true. They said if I ever see you again, they'll call the police. Please don't do this. He breathed, voice breaking. I'm sorry, I can't lose them. Then he hung up. I gazed at the phone screen until it became black. That was the last time I heard his voice. I stayed in my car for the remainder of the night, behind a petrol station 2 towns away. I peered at the shattered window, watching rain fall in crooked patterns. In less than 12 hours, I went from being a regular kid with a family, a boyfriend, and a future to being viewed as a criminal by everyone. Every time headlights drove by, I assumed it was my father's truck. I assumed he'd pull me back to complete what he started, but no one arrived. When the sun eventually rose, I peered in my rearview mirror. My face was bruised. My garment still had blood on it. And I discovered something simple but significant. Nobody was coming to help me. And that's when it struck me. My family hadn't merely thrown me away. They eliminated me. That notion stuck in my chest like a stone. I drove through the night without a plan or a map. I just had clothes on my back, a bag, and $250 in my wallet. I drove till the gas light flashed red. The engine coughed at a sign reading, "Welcome to Maplewood." I didn't care where I was. I stopped into a parking space behind a row of businesses that appeared half abandoned. My hands shook with hunger and cold. I'd been surviving on vending machine chips for days. A help wanted sign was attached to a diner window across the street. I stood there gazing at it, trying to work up the nerve to step in. When I walked in, the bell above the door chimed. A guy stood behind the counter with big shoulders, a gray beard, and deep creases on his face. "Can I help you?" he said, his voice raw as gravel. I saw the sign," I said. "I can wash dishes, do anything really." He examined me. My clothing was crumpled. My shoes still had muck from the road. "Have you ever worked in the kitchen?" "No, sir," he grunted. "You seem hungry." "I am fine," I lied. He groaned and nodded to the back. "My name's Paul. Sinks are there. You begin right now. You are given a supper at the end of your shift." That was it. No questions, no paperwork, just work. The kitchen was tiny, noisy, and heated. I cleaned plates and pans till my hands were raw. Paul served me my first meal, a half-eaten burger and fries from a client who did not complete. I didn't care. I devoured it like I hadn't eaten in weeks. When it was time to close, I tried to offer him the plate back, saying I'd find somewhere to sleep. Paul cleaned his hands and added, "There's a room upstairs. It ain't pretty, but it's got a bed and a lock. You can work it off." That was the first gesture of compassion I'd seen in weeks. The room was small, perhaps 12 feet across, with a stained mattress, a flickering bulb, and wallpaper peeling from the corners, but it was a roof, and the floor didn't move beneath me. I dropped into bed and slept for 14 hours straight. Over the following 3 days, I settled into a groove. Paul didn't say much, but he'd grunt something like, "Good job." Those words were more meaningful than any apology I'd ever received. One night, approximately 2 weeks in, I went downstairs to lock up and discovered Paul sitting at the counter reading the paper. He glanced at me and asked, "Kid, what's your story?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "I got a client in here today, a trucker traveling through, who said he saw your photo in a paper a few towns over. Some family issue." My stomach plummeted. I began shaking. "That is not what it appears to be. It is a falsehood. My sister, my adoptive sister, she made it up. I swear I never—" Paul raised his hand. "Calm down, kid." "I don't care what they say." I blinked at him. "You don't?" He leaned back on his stool. "Everybody's got a story. You're here working. That's what matters. Keep your head down, do your job, and rebuild your life. The rest will sort itself out." It took a second for those words to sink in. For the first time since that night, I did not feel like a monster. It took a second for those words to sink in. For the first time since that night, I did not feel like a monster. That night, I sat on the side of the bed, gazing at the damaged wall and attempting to understand it. Paul did not know me, but he gave me a chance. My own family couldn't do it. One night I was scrolling through my phone's contact list. I hesitated before phoning home because I needed to hear my mother's voice. Perhaps enough time had passed. Perhaps they recognized the truth. She answered the third ring. "Mom, it's me," I said gently. Silence. "Meredith." "Yeah, I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I found a job. Don't call here again," she told me. Her voice crackled. "Your father does not want your name spoken in this house," she said before hanging up. I gazed at the phone till the screen faded. That was the last time I attempted. Weeks became months. I worked double shifts and saved what I could. Paul began teaching me tiny things: how to repair a leaky pipe, patch a vent, and inspect a thermostat. "Learn to fix things, kid. It's the only way to survive," he'd tell me. Curiosity overcame me one night after closure. I searched for Claire's name. There she was, smiling in images, relatives surrounding her, clutching a cake shaped like a jewelry box. My mother stood by her, pleased, holding a framed photo of a missing ring post we all knew by then had been blamed on me. My brother was in the corner of the frame, smiling as if nothing had occurred. My throat stung. My stomach twisted so badly that I had to close the laptop. Then I determined that I would never be the version of myself they buried again. After that night, something inside me turned off. No more attempting to explain. No more waiting for someone to come around. I had had enough of being the version of myself that they had buried. I put myself into working at the diner. I'd arrive before daylight and depart well after it closed. I repaired leaking faucets, cleaned grease traps, and learned how to replace filters and outdated air vents. Paul noticed one afternoon when I was unclogging the sink with half my arm down the drain. "You ever thought about learning this stuff for real?" he said. I looked up, perplexed. "Like plumbing?" He chuckled. "Nah, bigger. Heating, cooling, air systems, HVAC. People always need heat or cold, kid. That skill feeds you forever." The way he said it stayed with me. I was bored of cleaning the plates. I wanted something permanent, something that could not be taken away from me. A few weeks later, Paul handed me a leaflet for the community college down the road. "Night classes," he explained, slipping it over the counter. "You'd be good at it. You pay what you can, and I'll cover the rest until you're on your feet." I looked at the page for a long time. Nobody had ever volunteered to help me in this way before, not even my own relatives. I signed up the next day. The first several months were terrible. I'd work 12-hour shifts at the diner, then take the bus to night school, struggling to remain awake during lectures on compressors and coils. Every time I fixed anything, whether cold air poured out of a vent or a damaged machine roared back to life, I felt as if I was repairing myself piece by piece. Paul continued pushing me. "Don't just get good," he stressed. "Get so good they can't ignore you." When I got my GED, I was nearly halfway through the HVAC program. I started making modest repairs on the side: Paul's home, the diner's vents, and a few regulars. When the certificate arrived in the mail, Paul hung it in the diner's corridor like it was his own child's diploma. "Not bad for a runaway," he commented, touching my shoulder. I laughed, even if hearing that word stung. With Paul's aid, I was able to save enough money to purchase a used pickup truck and a set of used tools. I left the cafe and began working full-time for a local HVAC firm. One summer afternoon, a coworker named Chris was accused of taking money from a client's kitchen counter. The employer was prepared to terminate him on the spot. Something about Chris's expression, the same terror I saw in the mirror years ago, drew me in. "Check the vent," I stated. Everyone gazed at me. I went up and removed the cover, and sure enough, the envelope had been sucked halfway down the duct by the return air. The client had probably placed it too near to the vent. Chris nearly cried. The boss apologized to the client. After that, Chris shook my hand as if I had saved his life. Paul learned about it via a source and phoned me that night. "Good job, kid," he remarked. "You didn't just fix air, you fixed a mess. That's what separates people from mechanics." It stayed with me. Years went by like that. Work, sleep, eat, and work again. It was straightforward, predictable, and safe. But occasionally, when I returned home at night, I felt a vacant place inside me, like another existence was still buried somewhere. One night, while completing invoicing, I opened an old account that I hadn't used in years. My hands trembled when I logged into social media. I should not have done it. My family was standing in front of a birthday cake, smiling and laughing with a small girl, Claire's daughter, who appeared to be about 10. My mother was holding her, and my father put his arm over them as if nothing had occurred. My brother was in the background beaming, as if he hadn't spit at my feet once. The caption said, "Family is everything." As I looked through the images, my chest pained. She looked cheerful and dazzling, as if she had never damaged anyone's life. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, shivering. For years, I feared they would break apart without me. However, they didn't. They just replaced me. That night, I sat in my truck in the parking lot after finishing my shift and made a decision. I went home and erased every old account tied to the name they gave me. I broke ties with the past as if it were a loose wire. By morning, I had filed the papers for a formal name change to my grandmother's maiden name. She was the only one who had ever treated me with genuine respect before all this. When the new ID arrived several weeks later, I gazed at it for a long time. The image appeared stronger, tougher, no longer resembling a scared girl trying to justify herself to people determined not to listen. That was the day I stopped fleeing from what they had done to me and began creating something they could never destroy. Years later, I founded my own firm, Winter Heating and Air. Only a few vehicles, 3 staff, and a regular stream of clients who trusted my work. We were not flashy, but we were dependable. Life had finally leveled off. I woke before dawn, brewed coffee in a dented percolator, and stacked the day's work orders on a clipboard that still smelled faintly of solvent and cardboard. I could measure my life in installations and service calls, a cracked heat exchanger in a row house off Maple, a whiny condenser fan in a bakery alley, a rooftop unit whose belts sang like bad violins until my hands quieted them. I kept the receipts in neatly labeled envelopes, stored the permits in a fireproof box, and taped a crooked Polaroid of Paul behind my desk where only I could see it. Sometimes I'd call him after a long day and listen to him grumble about supply prices and the weather, and then say, almost as an afterthought, "Proud of you, kid." It hit me every time. On Sundays, when the phone stayed mostly quiet, I drove the old pickup out along the state road until the radio fuzzed into nothing and the fields swallowed the horizon. I'd park, crack the windows, and sit with the engine ticking down. The wind moved like a slow hand over the grass. I tried not to think about front porches glowing warm behind glass and faces I used to know. When my mind drifted there anyway, I reached for the one truth that steadied me. Nobody was coming to save me, and nobody needed to. I had already done that. Work spread by word of mouth. We took on a small commercial contract, the strip mall with the dentist, the nail salon, and a pizza place whose back door never quite latched. I trained Sam, then B, then Arturo, teaching them the way Paul had taught me. Show up, do the job right the first time, wipe your prints, and leave the space kinder than you found it. When a customer tried to haggle me down below cost, I smiled and wished them well. When a landlord pressed to cut corners, I pointed to the code book and shook my head. After years of having my integrity twisted into a lie, I guarded it like it was the last working pilot light in a winter blackout. There were still nights I woke sweating, heart jackhammering, half convinced a knock would come and a badge would flash and some missing trinket would become my noose. The mind learns the shape of fear and keeps tracing it long after the monster has left the room. On those nights, I drove. City blocks to country dark, then back again, until the panic unwound from my ribs and I could breathe without counting. I avoided hometown news when I could, but the world has a way of leaking through the smallest seams. A customer mentioned an obituary about a neighbor who had a daughter do something awful once. Terrible scandal. A clerk at the supply house called me Miss in a tone that made the word feel like a smirk, and I found myself staring at the polished bell on the counter, seeing the gleam of my mother's ring reflected on its surface the way I used to see it on her hand as she waved hello goodbye at parties. I reminded myself that metal remembers nothing. People assign meaning. Metal does not. The bell was a bell. A ring was a ring. A lie was a choice. When tax season rolled around, I sat with a CPA who wore bright socks and spoke in numbers like other people spoke in gossip. He showed me how to depreciate the vans and schedule the equipment and pay quarterly without wanting to faint. "You've built something real," he said, almost surprised. "That's rare." I smiled without showing teeth. "It's all I've got," I said. It was enough. I tried dating once or twice and learned how to leave when someone's curiosity about my past felt like fingers prying under a sealed lid. I didn't owe anybody that story. Not then, not ever, if I chose. Some histories, told too soon, swallow the teller whole. Early summer crept in like a held breath. The phones rang a little more, the rooms hummed a little louder. We were booking a week out, then two. I was under a bakery's old unit again, sweat stinging my eyes, when my phone began to vibrate nonstop in my pocket. Unknown number with a hometown area code. I let it go once, twice. The third time it wouldn't stop. I cleaned my hands and said, "Yeah, this is Winter." There was a little hush, followed by a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Meredith." My chest clenched. "Who's this?" "It's me, Hannah. A girl from high school, quiet band kid, kind eyes, now a nurse, if I remembered right." Everything around me, the fan noise, the street sounds, the hum of the compressor, vanished into nothing. "Hannah, how did you—" "I know I shouldn't call," she interrupted, voice trembling, "but I thought you should hear this from someone who actually believes you." That line alone made my throat tighten. She went on, "Claire's been arrested." I blinked. "Arrested? For what?" "For lying," she said softly. "For accusing another woman in the same way she accused you. She tried to frame a coworker this time, said the woman stole her bracelet, but security footage showed Claire planting it herself. During questioning, she confessed. She admitted she lied about everything back then too. About you. About the ring." I leaned against the service van, dizzy. What? "She told them," Hannah said, voice shaking, "that she made up the whole story, that your mom's ring had gone missing, and she panicked because she'd lost it trying it on. She thought if she blamed someone else, someone everyone trusted, it would go away. You were the easy target." I pressed a hand to my forehead. The asphalt wavered in the heat. "I thought you should know," she whispered. "They've cleared your name, officially." I couldn't speak. My hand went numb around the phone. She paused. "I never forgot what they did to you." We spoke for another minute, awkward but kind. When she hung up, I stood there beside the van, staring at my reflection in the window. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or cry. My name was cleared, but it was 12 years too late. By daybreak, the calls started. Private numbers first, then emails. My company inbox even received one with the subject line, "Please call us back." Curiosity got the best of me once. I answered. "Meredith?" The voice cracked like brittle glass. "My mother." I said nothing. "Don't hang up," she pleaded quickly. "Claire told the police everything. We didn't know." I ended the call. They didn't know. They didn't care to know. Later that week, a local newspaper reached out asking for a statement. I said nothing. I wasn't interested in sympathy or publicity. I wanted something better, silence. But the stillness didn't last. A few days later, Nathan texted me. "We were young and stupid. Maybe we can start over." Then came a voicemail from my father. "We just want to see you, sweetheart. We made mistakes." Mistakes. That's what they called it. Mistakes happen when you forget an anniversary or miss a call. What they did was a choice. So instead of answering, I wrote letters, one to each of them. Not with forgiveness, not with sweetness, but with truth. I told them about the nights I slept in my car behind a gas station, shivering, about the moldy room above the diner, about Paul, the stranger who gave me a chance when my own family wouldn't. I wrote about how it felt to burn my school ID because their last name made me sick, about watching photos of them online, laughing around Claire and her daughter, while I scrubbed grease traps for spare change. I told them they hadn't just ruined my reputation. They'd destroyed my home, my trust, and whatever piece of peace I might have had left. Each letter ended the same way. "You didn't believe me when I told you the truth. Now you can live with it." I never mailed them. I kept them stacked in a shoebox in my desk drawer. That night, as I sat in my workshop surrounded by invoices, tools, and trucks, all things I'd built myself, I realized something. Everything I'd lost was gone forever. But everything I'd built couldn't be taken from me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt written again. They didn't do that, I did. But peace doesn't last forever. When the truth about Claire spread through town, the same people who had thrown me away suddenly remembered I existed. It started with a knock on my office door one afternoon. I was working on a thermostat unit when I heard someone call softly, "Meredith." I froze. When I turned, she was standing there, my mother. She looked smaller and older, as if someone had drained the color out of her. Her hair was gray at the roots, her eyes swollen from crying. In her trembling hands was a foil-covered casserole dish. "I made your favorite," she said quietly. "Chicken and rice. You used to love it." For a moment, I couldn't move. The smell hit me like a wave. It was the same dish she'd made the night before everything fell apart. "Why are you here?" I asked. Tears welled in her eyes. "I just want to see you, to say sorry. We were wrong. Claire lied. We know that now." I leaned against the counter. "You're 12 years too late." She wiped her nose. "I didn't know what to believe back then. You didn't even ask," I cut in. "You didn't let me speak. You kicked me out and told me never to call again." She stepped closer, desperate. "Please, Meredith." "Don't call me that," I snapped. "You lost that right." She flinched as though I'd hit her. I pointed to the door. "You should go." She hesitated, then placed the dish on the counter. "At least eat this, please." I looked at it, then back at her. "Throw it out when you leave." When the door closed behind her, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. 2 days later, my father showed up. I was outside finishing a repair when I saw him leaning against his truck as if he owned the place. He smiled faintly. "You've done good for yourself. Business, trucks, employees. I'm proud of you." "Get to the point," I said flatly. He shifted. "Your mother's not doing great. She cries every day. I thought maybe we could sit down and clear the air." I almost laughed. "You beat me and threw me out. You cleared the air that night when you told me I wasn't your daughter." His jaw tightened. "You don't have to keep holding on to hate, Meredith." "I'm not holding on to hate," I said, taking out my phone. "I'm holding on to self-respect." He frowned. "What are you—" I pressed a button. "Security? I've got someone trespassing outside the office. Big guy in a blue jacket." His face darkened. "You're calling security on your own father?" "You're not my father," I said coldly. "You're a stranger who ruined my life." A few minutes later, the guard from the neighboring building came out and asked him to leave. He cursed all the way to his truck and drove off. When the silence returned, I stood where he'd been and stared at the empty space. Rumors reached me later. Dad had lost his job after an outburst at work. Mom rarely left the house anymore. Nathan's wife had taken their kids and moved in with her parents after learning what really happened years ago. Everything they'd built, their picture-perfect family, was falling apart. People say karma takes time. I'd say it arrived right on schedule. One afternoon, my employee Sam walked into the office carrying a small package. "Hey, boss, this was sitting outside the door," he said, placing it on my desk. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes, each with my name, Meredith Winter, scrawled in trembling cursive. There was no return address, but I didn't need to open them to know who they were from. My mother had always been dramatic about her penmanship. I carried the box into the back room, placed it on a high shelf above the storage bins, and walked away. That night, I sat alone at my desk, staring at that shelf. I imagined what the letters might say: apologies, explanations, Bible verses about forgiveness, maybe pleas for me to come home. But forgiveness is a luxury for people who haven't slept in their car behind a gas station, wondering why no one believed them. I didn't want closure, I wanted distance. So I left the letters sealed, every last one. They wanted forgiveness because it would make them feel lighter, not because they deserved it. They didn't want me. They wanted atonement. And I wasn't going to give it to them. I looked up at the ceiling and said quietly to myself, "They erased me once. Now I'll erase them forever." I thought that was the end of it. But the past always finds cracks to crawl through. 3 months later, I received a letter. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single page. "Claire Harrison requests to meet with you at Maple Ridge Correctional Facility." For a long time, I just stared at it. Her name looked foreign now, like it no longer belonged anywhere near mine. I tossed it in the trash, then fished it back out. Then I threw it away again. But the thought wouldn't leave me. For 12 years, I'd wondered what I'd say if I ever saw her again. Maybe it was time to find out. A week later, I drove out to the prison. 2 hours through nothing but dry fields and gray sky. The guard checked my ID, buzzed me in, and led me to a cold visiting room that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. I sat at a metal table, palms flat against the surface. Around me, people murmured quietly, wives, parents, children, visiting someone they still loved. I wasn't one of them. Then she came in. I barely recognized her. She looked smaller, thinner, her skin pale under the harsh lights. Her hair was tied back tight, and the spark she used to carry, fake or not, was gone. The girl who once pointed at me and screamed, "Thief!" now looked like a shadow of herself. She sat across from me, eyes flicking up only once before dropping to her lap. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I didn't answer," I replied. She twisted her hands together. You look different. Older? I asked. She gave a faint, humorless smile. You look angry. No, I said evenly. I look like someone who survived. Her eyes filled instantly. I deserve that. No, I said quietly. You deserve worse. She nodded, tears forming. I know. And I'm sorry for everything, for lying, for ruining your life. Why? I asked. My voice came out calm, but it scraped my throat raw. Why me? She looked down. Because you were safe to blame. You never fought anyone, and everyone trusted you. I knew if I said you took it, they'd believe me. I leaned forward. You panicked, so you destroyed my life. You panicked, so you made your own sister a criminal. Her shoulders trembled. I didn't think it would go that far. I thought maybe you'd just deny it and people would forget. I just wanted the attention off me. Attention, I repeated, my voice low. You got that. You got a house full of people loving you, protecting you, while I slept in my car eating vending machine chips. She pressed her fists against her eyes. I know. I think about it every day. I hate myself for it. I can't sleep. Every night I see your face from that night. Good, I said flatly. You should. You should never stop seeing it. Her lips quivered. There's more. I didn't speak. My daughter, she whispered. They never told her the truth. Mom said it would confuse her to change the story, so she still thinks you're the one who stole the ring. I stared at her, stunned. After everything? She nodded slowly. They said she was too young to understand, that admitting they were wrong would reopen old wounds. They'd rather keep the lie than face what they did. My stomach turned. Somewhere out there was a little girl, innocent, growing up with my name covered in dirt. I stood up, the chair scraping loud against the concrete, heads turned. You don't get to tell me that, I said, shaking. You don't get to dump that on me now like it's something I can fix. She reached a trembling hand across the table. I'm sorry, Meredith. I really am. I can't undo it. I just needed you to know. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or grief, just emptiness. You took 12 years from me, I said quietly. I hope you never sleep peacefully again. She cried harder, choking on her words. I deserve it, she whispered. All of it. I leaned closer until our eyes met. You do. Then I turned and walked away. The guards didn't say a word as they buzzed me out. I got into my truck and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. I expected to feel free, vindicated, powerful, but I didn't. There was no victory in it, just exhaustion. Because when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't fix what's already broken. Some things stay cracked even after you stop caring. But as I started the engine and drove away, I realized something else. Walking away, without forgiving, without exploding, without looking back, was its own kind of strength. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt done. A year passed after that visit, and life began to make sense again. I sold my old house and bought a modest one just outside the city. 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard, nothing fancy, but fully mine. Every wall, every nail, was paid for with work from my own 2 hands. The mornings were quiet now. I'd wake to sunlight spilling across the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of a world that didn't owe me anything. For the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. Then came Thomas. He was one of my clients, a contractor who needed his office heating repaired before winter. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who said thank you like he meant it. When I arrived to fix the system, he stayed to help, handing me tools, asking questions. By the time the air finally kicked back on, we'd been talking for an hour. He called the next day, not about the heat, but to ask if I wanted to grab coffee. I almost said no. I wasn't looking for anything. But his voice had that rare mix of steadiness and warmth, so I said yes. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long drives on quiet roads where we talked about everything and nothing. He didn't pry about my past, and I didn't offer it. He just treated me like a person, not a story, not a ghost from some small-town rumor. 6 months later, he met Paul. They sat across from each other at the diner where I'd once washed dishes. Paul grumbled his usual gruff jokes, then pulled Thomas aside as I was in the restroom. Later, Thomas told me what he'd said. If you hurt her, I'll find you. I've got tools. That was Paul, still the same protective old bear. Thomas didn't flinch. I'm not here to hurt her, he said. I'm here to stay. We laughed about it later, but part of me felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. We moved in together a year after that. Life became simple again. Work during the day, quiet dinners at night, the occasional movie on the couch. He'd come with me on service calls sometimes, teasing me about how I bossed the machines around. "Hey," he'd say, grinning as I tightened a bolt, "you ever think about teaching this stuff? You'd scare the hell out of a room full of rookies." "Maybe someday," I'd reply, and maybe I meant it. For the first time in over a decade, I let myself think about the future, something bigger than pain or survival. Then one afternoon, while I was reviewing invoices, an envelope arrived with no return address. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another letter from my family, but when I opened it, a name jumped out. Inside, the handwriting was neat, direct. "Ms. Winter, I'm filing a civil suit against Claire Harrison for defamation and emotional distress. My lawyer says your testimony could help. If you're willing, please call me. You deserve that justice too." My chest tightened as I read his name again. It wasn't my Thomas. It was another Thomas, a stranger, someone else Claire had hurt. I read it twice. Then I called him that afternoon. We met the next day at a quiet cafe downtown. He was about my age, maybe a few years older. He shook my hand like we were old friends. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" he said with a sad smile. "Yeah," I answered, "but I guess we both survived it." We talked for nearly an hour, about the lies, the damage, the way the world treats the accused long after the truth is out. When he asked if I'd testify, I didn't hesitate. "I'm in." The case dragged on for months, but this time I wasn't running or hiding. I walked into that courtroom with my head high and my heart steady. For once, I wasn't the accused. I was the witness to truth. Claire sat across the room, her face pale, hands trembling on the table. I didn't look at her much. I didn't need to. The attorneys laid everything bare. Her repeated lies, her manipulation, the people she'd hurt. This time, there were photos, receipts, security footage, testimony from coworkers. There was no room left for doubt. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and told the truth, not with anger or vengeance, but with clarity. I spoke about the night she accused me, how my family turned on me, how I lost everything because of her lie. The courtroom was silent. "I didn't steal anything," I said quietly, "but what she took from me can never be replaced." No one interrupted. Even the judge just watched me, his pen still. When the verdict came, the room went still again. Claire was found guilty of defamation and perjury. The judge's voice was calm, final. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. As I stepped outside into the afternoon light, Thomas walked beside me. "You did good," he said. "So did you," I replied. We shook hands like two people who'd climbed out of the same fire and found daylight again. That night, when I got home, my Thomas was waiting on the porch. He didn't ask questions. He just hugged me and said, "You can breathe now." I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath until that moment. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner. I walked Edgar, our rescue dog. I slept, really slept, for the first time in years. Then, one night around midnight, my phone rang. Unknown number, same hometown area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said, "Answer it." "Hello?" There was a pause, then a rough, rasping voice. "Meredith." My hand tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" "It's Thomas," the voice said, my father. "Your mother found this number online. I don't have much time. The doctors say it's cancer, stage 4. I said nothing. "I don't want anything," he continued, voice breaking. "I just want to see you one last time before it's too late." He drew a shaky breath. "Please, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, sweetheart." The line went quiet except for his labored breathing. Then it clicked off. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the wall. Then I replayed the voicemail once, twice, 3 times. And finally, I deleted it. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just nothing. Because forgiveness isn't always peace. It's sometimes just permission to hurt you again. I remembered the night he'd hit me, the look in his eyes, the words, "You're not my daughter." I remembered sleeping in my car, rain leaking through the cracked window, tasting blood and fear. He chose what he wanted to believe, and now I chose peace. The next morning, I walked into my workshop. The smell of metal and oil filled the air. My company's name, Winter Heating and Air, was painted on the wall in bold letters. My team was already at work, laughter echoing faintly from the lot. I touched the name on the wall with my fingertips, feeling the texture of the paint, the reality of it. They had erased me once, but I rebuilt myself, bolt by bolt, breath by breath. And this time, my story ended on my terms, steady, quiet, and always moving forward. I wasn't anyone's daughter, scapegoat, or outcast anymore. I was Meredith Winter, and I was finally free.